Hey guys, welcome back to the DREZ podcast on Clownfish TV. This is Neon, and we've got a couple of very special guests with us today. First off, I want to reintroduce you to Michael Hovermail from Graph Paper Architect, who is going to be my co-pilot for this episode as we talk to Mr. Mark Kern. Formerly of Blizzard, and he is all over the internet. We're going to talk about a lot of internet and gaming related topics. So, Mr. Hovermail, introduce yourself, and then we'll introduce our special guest, Mr. Kern.
Oh, thank you, Neon. So I am Michael Hovermail, also known as a Graph Paper Architect. That's my business online as a life coach and D&D coach and a myriad of other things, game designer as well, and enjoying that. I have a long history in the gaming industry, dating all the way back to BBS Studios, EverQuest, Ultima Online, Meridian 59. Been doing that a long time, broadcast television studios and everything like that. But I'm enjoying being creative. That's the niche I want to fill. We need to fill the hole that Jim Henson left and Mr. Rogers left when they left. So that's kind of where I'm going. That's me in a small, teeny tiny nutshell. And I'm happy to be here. Love working with you, Neon, anytime I get a chance to.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. So we've got you here because you're a geek, and you're geeking out about talking to Mr. Mark Kern, who,
oh my goodness, holy cow, yeah, because I was there when Leroy, I was there when we were watching Oxhorn videos, and we still watch Oxhorn stuff during and I was there when these things happened, when we opened the gate and when we did a lot of stuff. So getting to speak to you, Mr. Kern, is a pleasure and an honor, and I appreciate it. So I'm looking forward to picking your brain on stuff.
All right, so here is the man of the hour, or the 2 hours, or however long this podcast winds up running, Mr. Mark Kern. Say hello, Mr. Kern.
Hi, everybody. GRUMMZ here, also known as Mark Kern, although I tend towards my 2D avatar more these days as it's kind of become my brand. So, longtime industry veteran, worked in video games since the early days when Bungie was selling their software out of Ziploc bags at Macworld Expo, all the way to, modern AAA games, and, and been very fortunate to be part of a lot of games that are in gamers' memories and have changed the industry.
Okay. Now, Mark, would you like us to refer to you as GRUMMZ throughout the podcast?
That'd be great, please.
All right. All right, GRUMMZ. So why don't you tell folks who aren't familiar about, how you got your start in the video game industry?
Oh, I've always been interested in video games. So even, when I was growing up, I was begging my parents for a computer, and they wouldn't give me one. So I built my own. I grew up overseas in Taiwan. My mother's Chinese, and I went, and they had, Taiwan, China, all famous for like cheap electronics and cloning parts and things like this. So they had clones of Apple II computers and that you could buy as parts. I bought a motherboard, which had no chips on it. I bought all the chips, and my friend did too. And we spent all summer building our own Apple II, soldering these chips on the board, putting it all together, and firing it up. So finally I had a computer, and the first thing I did was I started playing games. And I was playing Lode Runner by Broderbund, and then I wanted to write them. And so I taught myself programming, I taught myself assembly language, and I did more and more and more. And my parents were very unhappy with that. So, they were like, you should get a career, everything else. If you spent more time on homework than you did the computer, you'd actually be doing okay in school. And I was like, okay, I'll try. And I got to college, and I was still, very interested in games during that whole time. I was trying to make more games, make my own games. And eventually, I decided, okay, I better go to law school because that's going to please the parents, right? And went into law school, but was continuing to code games. And finally, a friend of mine who I was coding games with called me up and said, hey, Interplay wants to publish our game. So I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I need you to drop what you're doing in law school and code up this game with me. And I'm like, and do some art for it too. And I'm like, oh, you're crazy. I can't do that. I'm in the first year of law school. he flew down to convince me, and I decided to take my summer and devote it to that, to doing a video game with him. And we were working on this game. It was called Star Reach, and it came in this really funky crown-shaped box, because at that time, to stand out on retail shelves, all the game publishers were thinking, we got to make crazy boxes. And so this would look like it was supposed to look like a spaceship, but it ended up looking more like a Burger King paper crown. And it sat on the shelves, and it wouldn't stack because it was 3-dimensional, and it was but it was a precursor to RTS games, and that did decently well for them, for Interplay. And then I decided, hey, maybe this game thing's important. And so I looked around for a part-time job in law school. And that's when I hooked up with Naughty Dog. And I worked with Naughty Dog founders, Jason and Andy. Jason's with Oculus now. And Andy's retired doing his own thing. And I worked on, a 3DO game called Way of the Warrior, which was this Mortal Kombat game for the 3DO, and it did phenomenally well because there was no fighting games on the 3DO. This was the most expensive and powerful console you could buy at the time. And I remember I was a rotoscoping artist for that. So basically, they would shoot on black and white cameras themselves or actors dressed up in costumes that they had bought from Chinatown. It was so bad. and so I would get these frames, and there'd be like 300 frames, and then I'm using an early version of Photoshop, and I have to hand colorize them. I have to hand anti-alias them, and basically fix all their animations and stuff like that. So that was my first, I think, experience as an artist on a game, right? So I kind of wear a lot of hats: coding, arting, all that sort of stuff. And so I did that, and I was there when I think who bought them first? I think Universal bought Naughty Dog first. Before
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
and I was there when the fax arrived, and they were so excited. They got the fax with the buy offer, and it wasn't a huge deal back then, and Naughty Dog today would be worth so much more money. But they were so excited, and I was like, "What is this? What is this game business stuff?" And I was like, "What is this Universal stuff?" So I went back and to law school, and third year of law school, I decided to skip all my classes and work on my first game company. And you can do that in law school because there's no homework, right? The entire grade depends on your final exam. So I was working on starting my own game company, and that time trying to raise money from friends and family and that type of thing. And I was working on the demo and all this stuff. And I remembered that I skipped all my classes, and I crammed the whole last 2 weeks before finals in order to be able to graduate from law school. So I took a entire semester worth of law school classes, condensed it. I didn't leave the apartment. I had groceries delivered to me. I didn't sleep, and I just crammed everything, and I got straight A's. So it was really, better grades than when I went to class every day. That was really weird. So graduated from law school and immediately went into games. I didn't go into law at all, and we were doing a top-down space shooter. Right. Because and then I remember that we were looking around for publishers for this thing, and it was the .com era, and nobody wanted to talk to us unless we were making a web-based game. And it was a huge period of consolidation in the industry. There were thousands and thousands of games coming out every year, and it was too large to sustain. And so publishers were collapsing and being gobbled up on fire sales by bigger publishers. And this is where you got the big three, right? EA, Ubisoft, whatever they are. This is how that all condensed and consolidated. But we found two companies that were interested, and one of them was Bungie in the early days, in the marathon days. And
pre-Microsoft, Bungie.
Pre-Halo, right? And they were finishing up on Marathon, and then they were going to work on this game called Halo, and they were excited about that. But they thought about becoming a publisher, and so they met with us. I think we flew to San Francisco during GDC, and we met with them at GDC, and we had a deal that was inked, and it was going, and the lawyers going back and forth, and we had a website for the game, so publishers could go check it out. And we're about ready to sign with Bungie. And when the phone rings, and I get a call from Bill Roper from Blizzard Entertainment. It's like, this is Bill Roper from Blizzard Entertainment. We really like what you're doing here. We have a vision for doing a line of games for free on our Battle.net service called Blizzard Arcade, and your arcadey type game would be perfect for this. We would like to talk to you about a deal. And I said, yeah, you guys are too late. I'm about to sign with Bungie. The document's probably arriving tomorrow. But that's cool. Who are you guys again? Because this is I think Warcraft 1 days, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we make Warcraft 1, and it's an RTS.
Oh, and Superman for the Super Nintendo. Remember that?
And I remember what I'll never forget what Bill Roper said. He paused for a second after digesting this, and he said, "We'll kick the shit out of any offer Bungie has. Fly down tomorrow." And so I flew over to California from Boston, and I went and I met Alan Adham, who not many people have heard of Alan Adham, but he's actually probably the reason Blizzard games have all the values that they did back in the old school days. He was one of the original founders, but he doesn't like the limelight. He never gives interviews. He stays out of it completely. You never hear about him, but he is the genius behind the game design and the game values, the values of our production development in the old days of Blizzard. So he was a very charismatic guy, and also very powerful with Jedi mind tricks, and he used these in design meetings all the time. We walk in disagreeing with stuff and walk out going, yeah, that's a good idea. And he made a tremendous offer, and we decided to go with Blizzard. And we worked for Blizzard for a while, and we helped them with StarCraft graphics. Actually, they were working on a game called StarCraft, and they were struggling with an art reboot because they got trashed at E3, and everyone made fun of the game. Look and style. They called it Orcs in Space. And so he said, we need a new art style. You guys are doing a lot of interesting stuff. So we helped him out with the art style for StarCraft a little bit. And you can still see part of that original arcade game. There's a crashed spaceship in one of the maps. It's actually the spaceship from the game we're working on. But, Blizzard was doing another game called Diablo with a third party, Condor Studios up north. This is before they bought them, and they were putting all of their effort behind it. And they said, "Yeah, we're gonna be making this a tentpole game." So they called up one day, and Bill said, "Hey, I'm really sorry, Mark, but we've decided to concentrate on only doing one game at once and making it really big, and we're not going to do Blizzard Arcade anymore. So we want to cancel our contract, but here's the thing: we're going to pay you for." They actually paid us for like 2 months, and that's unheard of in the industry when a project's canceled. Usually, that's it; the money's gone. And they said, not only that, but you all have job offers. Why don't you bring your whole team over to Blizzard? You've helped us out so much. Why don't you come join us? And there's a project we'd like you to lead. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I love Boston. I love the East Coast. But eventually, we just couldn't find another publisher to pick it up because of the .com boom. Nobody had money for games. It was all going towards web. So I was like, fine. I decided to close the company. I told everybody, hey, we all have jobs waiting for us. And I'm taking it. I'm moving out to California. And I'm the only one who took the job. One guy went to one of the guys went to EA, worked on EA sports games for a while, sucked his soul, and he hated it, and he left the industry after a short bit. Another one went on to Xbox. My graphics programmer, really talented guy, did a lot of fundamental work on the original Xbox series. And another one started his own graphic design company, and people went their different ways. But I'm the only one who decided to go to Blizzard. And that's when I started my, I started with this internal game that I was supposed to lead by a third party that I canceled. And then I was put on Warcraft Adventures, and I canceled that. And then I got the nickname Sling Blade internally because I was axing projects. And I said, this is my job. If I axe these projects, I have no job. But they kept me around. And then I became manager of product development, and I was training all the producers and working with trying to get us to get multiple games going at the same time. And ultimately, I went, I was producer on StarCraft Brood War, StarCraft 64. Worked on a bunch of games there. Diablo 2 swallowed my soul. and then went on to lead the World of Warcraft team because they didn't have any leadership. It was all kind of gutted. The principals had left to go to found ArenaNet and make Guild Wars, and that's my arc at Blizzard. So, and then we shipped WoW, and 6 months after WoW, once I was sure China was launched and we got everything launched, I decided to leave and retire from games because games had totally burnt me out. But I ended up coming back to games because I loved it, and that's where I ended up now. And that's kind of long-winded, but that's the arc. That's my story arc so far.
So far,
Nice.
yeah, that was
Nice. See, that's
pretty impressive, right? So
yeah.
So can you comment, or would you like to comment on Blizzard today versus Blizzard then? Because it does seem like it's a completely different company now than it was back then.
Yeah, I'm totally comfortable doing that because everybody that I worked with at Blizzard is gone. Including my boss, the CEO, he's gone. All the top executives are gone. Everyone who was OG Blizzard they're just no longer there. So what you have at Blizzard now, I mean, I don't know them. I know a couple people, but for the most part, it's all new faces. It's a completely different company. It's not the same at all. So I don't mind talking about it. All my friends have long gone, so that's not a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Because the company definitely has changed. And this is one thing that we talk a lot on the Clownfish TV channel about, is that you see a brain drain when you've got founders of a company. They start a company, the company flourishes, it gets popular, it gets an audience, whether it's video games or comics or animation or whatever it is, right? And they build their audience, and then usually the kiss of death is when they sell out to a corporation, some big corporation. They come in, they start making changes, and it's kind of like the whole ship of Theseus, right? Where the original company is no longer there. The name is there. The brand is there. I mean, look at we talk about Pixar. Like, they still use the Pixar name, but John Lasseter's no longer there. So is it even the same company? So, and I've noticed this myself, just as someone who's played Blizzard games for a long time, that it does not seem like it's the same company at all.
Mm-hmm. No, it's completely different, and it's a completely different industry too, as far as AAA goes. We used to. The industry then and the industry now are staffed by two different types of people. The industry back then, there was no money to be made. You were literally, like I told the story about, how I met Bungie first was they were selling Marathon out of Ziploc bags at Macworld Expo in Boston. And, and they were happy to make a couple grand that show. It was not a job you took because you expected to make money, or there was fame involved, or if it was even popular. In fact, it was kind of stigmatized. If you played video games back then, only the nerds played video games, and not in the cool nerdy way of today. Technology was not a big industry, so there wasn't a lot of panache. And so if you got into games, you did it because you loved it, even though you could make much more money having a stable career somewhere else in software, or become a doctor or a lawyer, accountant, or a marketing artist, or that type of thing. No, we all did it because we couldn't stop playing games and thinking about how we wanted to make games. And we worked so hard that we crunched. And this wasn't because managers were telling us we had to work overtime. This wasn't because we were being exploited. None of us were making money. None of us could call this a career. We all just stayed up, and we would make games all through the day, and then we would game together all through the night in the hallways of Blizzard. We'd be playing Magic. We'd be playing, anything. So this was a lifestyle, and this was a very poor lifestyle. And we did it, and we got better, and we had no skills sometimes. Like, we didn't know what we were doing half the time. We taught ourselves. There was a lot of self-learning. We were trying to one up each other. If someone did something cool in the industry, we were like, that's really cool. Let's try to beat that, and that was what drove us. And that changed. And later on, games became a very big industry. And it just grew and grew and grew. And the market became more and more mass market. And you started to attract a different class of game developer, especially, and this class of game developer was very interested in the industry because it was growing fast, and they wanted a career that was growing fast, but they wanted a career. It was for different reasons. And they were gamers. They love games too. And this is what they want to do, but they wanted more of a 9-to-5 kind of job. Right. And then to go home after that and be with their families. And, as I got older, I realized, hey, that's a totally valid lifestyle. You want a 9-to-5 job. You want to crank, do your best, and go home to your family. Cool. But it does have repercussions. It has repercussions on, let's just say, the passion of gaming, right? The passion of game creation. And the reason we started hiring more and more of these people is because we had to grow these teams so fast. And we needed very specialized skills, and we couldn't self-teach ourselves some of this stuff. Some of this stuff was very esoteric. And so we started off saying at Blizzard that we only hire gamers, right? And I think that started to change. And we were like, well, we really need a specialist in hyperdimensional 3D, anisotropic, jiggle physics, right? And if you want someone like that, you can't have too many criteria. If they kick ass in this one specialty, you're going to overlook that maybe they only play mobile games, right? And it's like, okay, you don't really play the games in our business, but you play games in another one. Okay. And then this is kind of a slippery slope after that, right? As things get more and more specialized, you start going after the skills you need as a business because the stakes are so high now, and you kind of relax the other stuff. And then you have to have, because you're supporting, developers with careers and families and everything else, then you have to change the culture. And you have to be careful that what you assumed about crunching because you loved it is now a bad thing. And it is a bad thing. I'm not saying it was ever healthy to live that lifestyle, but you have to make sure that you're not doing it. And, and it was all, I believe early crunch was not conscious. It was just something that we all expected to do as a team, and we were all excited to do as a team. But now you're like, oh, wait, these people have families, they have lives. Okay, we can't assume this, and it's wrong to assume this, and we have to start changing procedures and things like this. So, and then games got so big that you started attracting another class of personality, which is the businessman, right? So the suits. And so now you're dealing with big money. You got to bring in a full-blown CFO. You got to bring in, a lot of C-level executives that have skills in this on hand, how to handle a public company and everything else. And they come in and they start diluting the culture. They're not product people, right? They're not, and Steve Jobs talks about this. And so you get this slow metamorphosis of culture, and then the games change, and it's not about, hey, what cool game can I make that's going to be more interesting than that other cool game I just played the other week. It's more about, we're about to drop, $600 million on development here. Let's make sure that what we're doing is going to sell. So let's pick something safe. Let's, make sure that we don't stray too far from the formula. And then that all changes. And now if you're a creative individual on a team, and you want to do games because you're passionate about it, but you're not allowed to because you have to stay within a narrow box, two things are going to happen. One is you're probably going to leave games. Because this happens even on OG teams. Nobody wants to work on a sequel, right? Nobody wants to work on the expansion. Well, that was a constant problem we had. We all want to do something new, something cool. So if you're going to make Assassin's Creed 6 or 7 or whatever it's going to be, those people are going to be really bored of it, and your top creatives are going to leave. And you have a lot of professionals left behind that maybe they don't care as much about, what they're making, as long as, they have a good career and everything else. And okay, they'll stick around and they'll make it, but the reasons change. The reasons are different. And the risks are no longer there. And the ones that want to take risks leave and make indie games. That's what I did. Or they just go into traditional stuff and say, I'm going to make my money elsewhere. So you have two different types of people staffing these companies now. In the old days, you had a different class of people maybe less specialized, maybe less skilled in some ways, but have a lot of passion and who are doing it for different reasons than the crews of today. And the crews of today are very professional, highly skilled. They know what they're doing. They can make fun games, but it's different. And maybe you could tell me, was this the case with, like movies in the old days versus movies now, or television? What happened in other media industries, and does this parallel it?
Well, that definitely I can pitch in on that one, and it does absolutely parallel a lot of industry, and in my experience, and also in the broadcast industry as well, because you'd have, once you get the suits involved, and it's amazing when you bring that up, because it seems like that is the standard. And I remembered I actually had the privilege of speaking to Larry Elmore for a while, and we were talking about the old days and TSR and things like that, and same kind of situation. He remembered very clearly, he was in there with the artists, they were drawing and they were doing stuff, and then they started bringing in these, what they called the suits, and these people were not gamers, and they would come in and ask them about, oh, can you draw this or draw that, or how's it going to go? And then they would ask him, well, what are you going to do when you got a goblin with a dagger? You're going to roll in a D4, D6, or ask them any kind of questions or gaming at all. And they had no clue. The only thing they understood was things like how much did the box cost and how much you could put on the shelf and this and that and all these other kind of number things. But what happened is that you end up with those people in control. Those are the people that end up in creative control. Same thing in movies and television as well, because you have your investors. The investors say, well, I'm going to want X dollars by X day, and you're going to make sure that happens for me. And the suit goes in and goes, yep, that's my job. That's how I pay for all of my stuff. So I'm going to make sure that happens. And then they have to have that amount of control in the company to then, like you said, initiate crunch or have, be able to say, well, look, we're going to go towards making this model more safe, or microtransactions, or whatever it is that they want to try to do. So you're right. I mean, it constantly does that. Once a business gets to a level where there's a lot of money, and that money wants more money, and then it's like, that's it. This is about making money. We don't care. We don't care if your game changes lives. We don't care if, when people walk away from this game, that they feel some sort of intrinsic value to themselves, or make changes in their own life or their own structure because of what they experience in the narrative or the story of the game. I mean, we've all experienced that. We've all had games when you get done with that and just like, wow, or a great movie. Mine was, Muppet movies and Rogers and Henson and all that kind of stuff. And you experience those. And the thing is, and I get a little bit, I'll stay more towards the rails on this, but what happens is we experience media. That media then becomes part of whom we are, what we are, especially when you're in your formative years or any other type of time when you experience these different forms of media. And games are extremely potent in that way because they're very interactive. Do you build your base here or there? Do you kill this NPC or not kill that NPC? Or, what sort of situations and what sort of experience do you have that then become part of who you are? And as a creative myself, you want, at least I do, I want to make something that people go, wow, that was amazing. That changed my life, I'll drop some spoilers. I'm sure we all know, like when Sturm got stabbed by the lance from Kitiara kills him on the bridge. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I figured we were all grognards, at least somewhat, but you read that and you go, oh, wow, and he stood for something, and he meant something, or something like that. There's those moments, and you don't have a lot of that when you are having the suit that says, well, we needed to return X dollars. So if we make something that pisses off people, which is nowadays, I mean, I'm sure we have nowadays where they're like, man, no, we don't want to make the mob mad. We're going to just have nice, safe games, or have this or have that, and not push boundaries, not have stories or have narratives that are that way. And so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it always seems to become that, unless you have what you were talking about in early Blizzard, where you have the gentleman that was running the games, running this company in the background. He was, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but he was running it, right? And Blizzard at the time, I remember I was there 3,000 years ago. I was there, Gandalf. And so Blizzard had the rep. They were not going to turn out any kind of crap. You knew that when you were done loading all the floppies, that it was going to be good. It was going to work. It was going to be solid. You weren't going to have problems with it. And,
you know why we were able to do that? We resisted the suits for a long time. Like there were many companies that bought and sold Blizzard over the years as the parent companies imploded. Like Vivendi imploded. We were part of Universal for a while, Universal Vivendi, and that was weird being part of a movie company. But they wanted to put their own staff in our offices, their own IT, their own HR, and all this stuff, and we said no. And every time they had a bad suit idea, we said no. And the reason we were able to do that is because as a management team, we were united and we shielded all the devs from this because we didn't want devs to worry about corporate bullshit, right? And we said, no, the devs get to focus on one thing. They don't have to deal with any of your stupid bullshit, and you're not coming here. I'm sorry. If they show up at the door, we're going to just call the police and turn them away. We were dead serious. And we said, don't fuck with us in no uncertain terms. And we used to say at Blizzard internally, we rule, they serve. And that sounds very egotistical, but that was the phrase we used when we formed this wall against corporatism. The problem is that only works if you're the golden calf. Okay. And this is another point I want to bring up. Not only has the type of teams that work on games changed, the audience has changed. So what do I mean by this? Okay, Blizzard brought in the lion's share of revenue in the early days. But what happened was mobile gaming exploded and Activision started buying mobile game companies, and they were now the golden calf. And so when they're pulling in most of the money, your political say within the umbrella of that giant corporation goes way down because it starts eroding. So it started eroding at Blizzard. And up until the point where, and now I'm getting into a little speculation. So this is, people wondered why one of the original founders and the CEO, my boss, Mike Morheim, stepped down from Blizzard. I think that was engineered. I think that that Activision wanted more control, and I think that they gave him so much bullshit, and it was eventually like, here's your golden handcuffs, can we part ways? And that's speculation on my part, because what happened as soon as he left, they put in their own people. It's like suddenly, I think it started with the CFO. They handpicked the CEO, the new one of Blizzard, and he was an internal Blizzard guy. Probably bled Blizzard blue, as we used to call, and he didn't last very long. And so they replaced him with I think 2 other people, co-presidents or something like that. I'm murking on the history, but that was when the takeover was complete. The entire upper echelon of executives left or was gone, and then suddenly you had the Activision people brought in, and that can only happen when you no longer have leverage within the corporate family, and that's because the bottom line isn't there anymore. I mean, Blizzard was still making money hand over fist, but compared to mobile and predatory monetization practices that are bringing in 10 to 100x the revenue, you got nothing to say. Sorry, we're going to do it our way, and you have no leverage anymore.
Yeah, and that's kind of we're seeing that right now. I think with Wizards of the Coast, the Hasbroification of Wizards. Michael and I have talked about it, extensively. But you see the new CFO, or not the new CFO, sorry, the new CEO and the new head of Wizards are both from Microsoft, and they flat out said it. They actually said it in their last call. They're trying to pivot Wizards into being a video game company. They want Dungeons and Dragons to basically be a mobile app. They want you to play their virtual tabletop. They want in-app purchases. They want to monetize individual players rather than just selling one rule book to the DM for the entire group. They want everybody to pay. That's what their end game is. And at that point, again, to go back to the ship of Theseus, it's no longer Dungeons and Dragons. It's just another fantasy role-playing game, mobile game. And that's what they're doing to it. And that's a Hasbro thing, because they got to always, that bottom line, they always got to make more and more and more and more. And, and you lose so much in the process. And anytime something gets sold, look at, whether it's, George Lucas selling Star Wars, or, to Disney, it's as soon as you take the creatives out of it, they may own the name, but they don't, I guess they own the name. They don't have the heart and soul of the company they bought anymore. It's my opinion.
Yeah. And what's happening with D&D is so fascinating to me, because, I play D&D. I think before the stream, we were talking in the green room, and I was blue box and with the dice that would chip and the crayons that would go in there.
High quality stuff.
Michael, you were red box, so that's a couple boxes after me. Neon, when did you start with D&D?
It was red box. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I actually started. It was ass backwards. I started out buying AD&D modules, not realizing that you had to go buy the books. And then the AD&D books, I was pretty young because I saw the older kids playing it at school. And I'm like, these books are really complicated. So I went and got the red box, and we started with the red box. And then I went back a couple of years later, and I was able to finally play the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, which my son picked up a copy of that module for me, by the way. And he surprised me with it the other day. He's like, "Hey, Dad," because you're talking about it. I'm like, "Oh my God, this brings back memories." That was like the first AD&D module I played. But so I would say red box, and then I got more into second edition.
I was so naive. I want to get to this point about what's happening with D&D and their virtual tabletop initiative and the bringing in of Microsoft executives that are video game oriented. I actually have a friend of mine who's actually on the VTT team, but I just the early D&D stuff reminded me of my first days, and I got to just tell this story about how naive I was. I didn't have the rule books, right? They're expensive. I lived overseas in Taiwan. The only guy that had them was the DM, and I was coming into a campaign, and I was the new guy, and I guess I got the equivalent of a D&D virtual hazing. Because I think we started at, like, I forget what level, but White Plume Mountain was my first adventure ever, right? And so I went into White Plume Mountain, we got all this treasure, and then old school D&D, it wasn't just about character development. You could also have retainers, right? So, and you could build keeps and have a castle. So I had a little castle going. I put all my treasure there and everything else. And then, I don't know, I had to go on vacation with my parents or something. I was gone for a week. I came back, and the DM informed me, it's like, "Oh yeah, welcome back. You don't have any gold anymore or treasure because the other guys, they raided your castle and took everything." I was like, "Oh, okay. I guess that's the way the game is played." But they were really just kind of, that was my initiation ritual into this DM's campaign. So anyways, different atmosphere back then. But the whole point is that D&D is a social experience, and sitting around a table is the best way to play it. I play on VTT now since COVID, right? But the best way is still in person, and it amuses me no end that they are trying to create a video game out of D&D. If you look at their virtual tabletop solution, it's got full-blown animations, spell effects, everything else. They're starting to automate stuff, and everyone's arguing, well, at what point is the line where you're no longer tabletop, but you're a full-blown video game? And I know what their strategy is. It's like, we will straddle both. We will be in this new category that will be a fine line between tabletop and video game. No. Well, you know what that is? That's the same thing we used to say about the problems of designing multiplayer classes. If you try to do two things at once, you're going to suck at both. You're going to suck at both. And and unless you have a tremendous amount of experience in how to blend this stuff, and it has a unique niche role like multi-classing does, you're going to end up with a character nobody wants to play. And in case of a hybrid character, you can easily screw that up, and you can much more easily screw up trying to create a new genre that's not quite tabletop and not quite a video game. Pick your battles. You guys have this has never been done before. You guys certainly are not the people to try this. You have almost zero video game experience, and you're not going to be Baldur's Gate, because let's face it, hardly anybody is. And you're not going to be, and you're going to start watering down the tabletop stuff. All your tools and stuff will be more video game focused because you're trying to monetize the shit out of that. Wrong. And you're going to end up in this awful middle, and Critical Role is going to eat your lunch.
Oh yeah, yeah. Everybody is. I mean, that's so shocking about this is just God the incompetence at Wizards over the last couple of years. I mean, the OGL debacle and the fact that the backlash was so severe that all these other game companies saw a massive uptick because people play tabletop, they want tabletop, they want to buy a tabletop game. So if Hasbro's not going to give it to them, they're going to go someplace else.
Yeah. One of the things I find fascinating about the OGL debacle is how they managed to erase it. It's now it's gone. I mean, of course, now people's attention spans don't last very long, but if you look, it was a huge brouhaha. Then they had their summit and they had the creators go, the YouTubers and all that other kind of stuff. Now you look around. What are those YouTubers all talking about now? They're back to talking about D&D. It's all back to good old talking about D&D, all of them. And it's just like, as if nothing happened.
Yeah,
that's
not
nothing ever went on.
As soon as Critical Role drops covering D&D in their games, that's gone.
Oh, they did. Yeah. Crit Role already went on with their own. They have their own now. They have a different setup. They sort of borrowed, adopted. I haven't really read a lot about it, but basically there was a little scandal. Yeah, they switched over. They have a totally different, they're not playing D&D anymore. They're playing a completely different setup. And there was a little scuffle online that I saw about, they were talking about whether or not they developed it, the Crit Role team developed it, or whether they got it from another game developer. And then the game developer
which system? They have two systems. Which system are they playing?
I'm trying to remember the exact name of it. I'll have to look it up here. Let's see. Crit Role, a new system.
Yeah, they got two. They got a narrative heavy one, and then they got a
yeah. They're publishing 2 new RPG systems. Let's see,
because that drives their whole audience.
Yeah, I would have to look it up, but
and they have done so much to make D&D mass market.
Yeah.
Even if
but they're not playing D&D anymore. Yeah, they're not. They are not playing D&D anymore. They've gone away from that. They have their own system. That they adopted, but
and I'm telling you that that the whole everyone's gotten over OGL and they've switched back to D&D. That's only going to last until their new game is out, because right now, maybe they drop D&D from their coverage, but there's nothing else that players can play right now. But and I know that most of their audience doesn't play D&D. They more. They're an ecosystem that watches D&D play, right?
Yes.
Whole thing around it. But as soon as the products are available and they finally ship their new system, I think Hasbro's in huge trouble, and I think Hasbro doesn't know how to do software and is going to completely screw up their VTT, and they're going to monetize the crap out of it, and it's going to be a flaming wreck. And it's going to be a shadow of a brand, and Hasbro's going to dump it. They're going to sell it.
That's been speculated for a while. That goes back to pre-pandemic. There were some people talking on, I think it was ICV2, that there were rumors that Hasbro was trying to give WotC as much curbside appeal as they could, and that the end game was to pawn it off onto like Tencent or something. And that might be part of why just speculation on my part, but it might be part of why they're trying to go the video game route. Like, this is going to be more attractive to a potential buyer than a tabletop game, a board game.
Yeah, well, Baldur's Gate just screwed that plan.
Yeah, right.
Because
we can talk about that.
Because Tencent's not looking at that property. They're looking at the guys who made Baldur's Gate, who can actually execute on the plan. And what'll happen is they'll try to get their hooks into Larian, and I don't think Larian's for sale. The CEO said he's never going to sell, but I don't know, a couple $1 billion can talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what's kind of crazy about all of that is that I don't really see, because we've all been around the block several times, but when I have seen the YouTubes and everything, I'm not really seeing a lot of innovation, I guess. I mean, I'm looking at this going like, well, I had this when I played Mass Effect. I had people talking about and choosing dialogue trees and animated, little cutscenes. And it's like, okay, we've already been doing this for quite some time, or the scene where even just the screen of when you're looking at your own character and you're deciding what your character is going to be wearing. I mean, that just looks like the loading screen for Elder Scrolls Online. I'm like, that looks like Elder Scrolls Online. Exactly. So what, I've been trying to understand, other than the fact that it is, in my personal opinion, I think it should be adult. It should be an AO rating because it's basically a massive dating sim, I guess. I mean,
well, yeah, you can do. I mean, my son's playing it right now, and he's like, "My God!" He said, "You can do anything in this game you can possibly imagine." Like,
yeah, and it's full graphics and everything. Like, they're not. We're not talking about where it's blurred or anything. It's there.
It's two things. It's two things. One is, like you said, hey, there's nothing new here. I was playing this back in the old school days. Well, that's exactly it. You can't get that experience anymore.
Right.
This is where gameplay was deep and there was challenge to it to overcome. So you get that dopamine hit in a way that's I think longer lasting and more powerful than just getting the next shiny loot drop in Diablo 4. Right. And you have deep mechanics that matter. You have tactics that matter. And so you feel more accomplished when you do it. They have a huge storyline that's rich. Then the characters grab you in the tutorial. I was looking at the difference. Oh, I'm going to get into trouble again. I was looking at the leaked Starfield footage of the first 40 minutes of gameplay. And I gotta be careful. I'm not gonna be careful what I say. I'm gonna just say I'm gonna be the bad boy of the industry. I'm gonna speak my mind because that's my freedom, right? As soon as I start to box myself in, I don't have my self freedom anymore, and that's not good for me. I don't play that game. So it's very polished. The Starfield stuff is very polished, but you meet two characters in the beginning, and I won't give any spoilers. It's just a tutorial, and you don't care about them at all. And the high point of the action of the tutorial is you mine a rock. All right. Contrast that with Baldur's Gate 3 or even Skyrim. Okay, let's talk about not even Baldur's Gate 3, because people say that's an outlier, that's an exception. Okay, in Skyrim, you're immediately curious about what happens because why? You're in a cart, you're a prisoner, right? And the stakes are high. What are the stakes? You're going to be executed. And you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And then, I forget what happens. This is a dragon attack that comes along.
Yeah, the dragon comes in and wrecks the place, and then you're able to escape, and you have that. And you're right. And that's a key part of narrative design where it hooks you, it draws you in, you're immediately invested. You have to build that investment immediately. You've got to get that going on. And even back in the day, I mean, we had that investment. And so like when Kerrigan turned into the Zerg Queen, and you're just like, oh God,
yeah,
man, and you feel it. It's like
you cared about Raynor, you cared about
Kerrigan, you cared about them.
Minimal cutscenes for that. There were no direct cutscenes for most of that. It was all done in-game dialogue, right? But you cared about these characters. Baldur's Gate 3, one reason people get attached so quickly is because even in the tutorial, you've got a great villain. You've got great stakes. If you don't fix this thing, you'll die, and you're introduced to NPCs right along the way that you care about. And the battle scene is just over the top, right? And so your combat tutorial doesn't feel like a tutorial. And that's what makes that game engaging from a story perspective, is that you care about the characters immediately. And you have the deep mechanics that are going on, and you can they exploit the medium of video games. I talk about this a lot. So many people do not understand this on my own industry. What is the medium of books? It's words, right? What is the medium of movies? Do you sit there and put a lot of exposition on the screen? No, you use moving pictures to convey the emotion and the story in a way that words alone cannot do. You have a transformation, a step there. Nobody goes back, and then when you get to games, your medium is now interactivity. It's what can I do? And Baldur's Gate has a lot of sandboxy elements and creative ways that you could do almost anything in the game to get around a problem, right? It exploits the medium perfectly with interactivity. And so many games try to be movies. They try to just give you cutscene after cutscene after cutscene, and they make the interactivity more and more vestigial. And that's like a movie trying to be a good movie by printing words on a screen. It's like, oh, like a game doing cutscenes is like a movie that says we need to put pages of a book on the screen and have people read it. You are not exploiting the interactivity. So Baldur's Gate 3 exploits the interactivity, has characters and rich storytelling that you care about, and brings back old school risk reward gaming, right? Where if I take this risk, I could get a great reward, and I need to have some amount of skill, and I have to be engaged with the interactivity to overcome it. 3 pillars that they nailed. That's why it's an outlier, not because they're experts in their field. I mean, you're a AAA studio. You should be a fucking expert in your field. Don't give me this crap. And you know what? And if you're an expert in games, you can design almost any genre of game. It actually crosses over very well because the fundamentals are the same. So that to me is why Baldur's Gate 3 is such a success as a game. Plus, I think it streams really well, which is important. We call that over-the-shoulder appeal. Back when there wasn't streaming at Blizzard, we said it's got to be important that your friend who's looking over your shoulder playing the game says, I want to play that too. All right, now you build it so that you make sure that it's interesting for streamers to talk about. There's things that happen that streamers can talk about as you play. That's the modern equivalent of that over-the-shoulder. So that's what I think makes, Baldur's Gate the game of the year as far as I'm concerned right now.
So has streaming, has that changed game development then, in your opinion? Or studios developing games, like you said, to have that over the shoulder appeal?
I actually don't think they think too much about that. I think I think they need to think more about that. I think what you have is that it's not the game developers that are building for Twitch. It's that marketing has figured out that Twitch is where to go, right? And they realized that if they could do zero marketing and just hire a bunch of Twitch people to play and blitz Twitch for a solid month, and they can have phenomenal sales for a title no one's ever heard of. What game am I talking about? Apex Legends.
Yeah.
Right? Apex Legends, nobody knew it was in development. It came out of left field, but they went and they hired all of these streamers to do it. And I don't think they even had in-game drops at the time. Maybe they did, but that was a refinement that came either then or a little bit later, where streamers could give away codes for in-game items and things like that, giving another incentive to watch this stuff. That was the key. And now they figured it out that influencers are important and Twitch streamers are important. I was doing that back in the day with my studio Red 5. I had a whole department set up. The Twitch founders, back when Twitch was nothing, came over to our offices just to hang out. And we would talk, and they were so cool. And I really believed in their vision that we actually we were the first to integrate Twitch streaming. They used to have a way that you can integrate streaming directly into the game. So our game could connect directly to Twitch, and you could stream if you wanted to at the push of a button. And we did one of the first. We did Firefall Fest, which was a live fest, and we brought. And also, nobody knew about influencers. I brought in people to play. I said, let's get Day 9 in there. He was a big esports guy. Let's get Felicia Day. Let's get Nathan Fillion. And let's bring him in. And it was much more economical to do that now. Now rates are super high for that. We were the first to do that. And I can tell you, I pissed off my marketing department, which was run by a vice president of EA that I had hired. And I had a hard time trying to find someone who understood where marketing was going. And they trashed it. They're like, why are you building a streaming studio? And let's face it was a tiny warehouse that we got for cheap down the street, right? Yeah. But we built some 2x4 sets. We didn't spend a lot of money on this. We spent money on lighting and equipment because we wanted good production values. I wanted production values that were far in advance of the time, because I knew that that's where this was going, and I wanted anytime people look at our older content, I wanted it to hold up. So and so that's where it all went, and I understood that as far and marketing wise was where it went. And from my Blizzard background, I knew that over the shoulder appeal was important. But I think today you have marketing fully understanding the importance of Twitch. And the game developers, I don't think they're thinking about that so much. I don't think they're thinking about, hey, am I presenting an interesting thing to show here. I think they're just making the game. Is there room to think more about that? I think so. But at Blizzard, we didn't obsess about over the shoulder either. We just were aware of it. It's like, okay, this should be fun to stream. This should be fun. This should be fun for someone to watch, you know?
Well, this could actually segue into talking about independent games and gaming journalism, because so many independent games became a thing, became pop culture icons because of streamers, because of YouTubers, because of Twitch. I mean, I'm thinking Among Us, Five Nights at Freddy's. I mean, these indie games otherwise maybe normally wouldn't have, and nobody would have paid them any attention, but because we had big YouTubers, big streamers playing them, these $5 bargain bin games wound up being a thing. Like I think Among Us, it was like 2 years after it came out that became a thing because of YouTubers.
Yeah, and that's because it plays super well as a reaction game. Like reaction videos are very popular, and Among Us is a great game for reaction shots from Twitch streamers, right? So I think I'll amend that. It's not just over the shoulder appeal now. You got to give the streamer something to react to in order to get that emotional moment during a stream.
That's cool. So what is your take on indie gaming right now? It seems like there's a massive uptick in just the quality and diversity in indie games these days. It's pretty amazing.
I'm so glad, because I mean, AAA has evolved into an industry that as a creator, I'm just no longer interested in, and politically I'm no longer interested in, because the office politics are brutal now. It's definitely Dilbert land. And that's not something I like the old school, right? We were talking about this again before stream in the green room, where we're talking about old school Blizzard. You sort of like, that was your family. You worked there during the day, and at night you gamed together. And we were like we were a tight band, and unfortunately there were not too many women back then in the industry. I used to try to like deliberately recruit women from all sorts of places, MIT and everything else. And nobody wanted to, because games were not a career at the time. And so we couldn't get that wider appeal and get more people into the company. But we were like, I don't know. I was about to say Band of Brothers, 40K Space Marines. We were, we loved being, trying to be badasses. I mean, we were geeks, right? But so when I say badass, I don't mean that that we're all like working out and we're buff. I mean that we're like hardcore nerds, and we're really trying to like, be the best nerd we can be and out nerd everybody else. And there was that sort of camaraderie, and we would also argue with each other in design decisions, knock down, drag out arguments. But when we left that conference room and had made a decision, we all banded together, right? It's like, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to put our all behind it. So a very different environment back then. I forgot how we got on this topic. What were we talking about?
Indie games.
So
indie games. Yeah.
So, I think, so I don't like the way the AAA industry is now, because the AAA industry is catered towards a ultra casual market. Now, at Blizzard, one of the secrets of OG Blizzard's success is we did cater to the casual gamer. But that has changed. The casual gamer back then was still a hardcore nerd gamer by today's standards. Yeah. Okay. And we used to have what we called the donut theory, which was and Alan came up with this, and I never understood the analogy, because he said the market that we are is the donut. You have got the fleshy, doughy goodness outside, which is the casual gamer, but the whole of the donut is the hardcore fans, and you got to give both of them a reason. Everyone should be able to play our game and finish it, but then after the game is done, you got to give the hardcore some mode that they latch onto to play long term, and the hardcore influences the casuals doing it, and that worked for a long time. And we also weren't trying to be a mass market brand. We used to say, Alan used to say, that we are the Gucci of games. Not that we're like super expensive or nose in the air, but we are like I guess the word we would use today is bespoke, right? Or artisan. We're an artisan game company. We're not trying to be mass market. And one of our mottos was don't be greedy. Don't be too greedy. Because if you get too greedy, you start making decisions that compromise the game. So that was the philosophy then. But the market changed, as we talked about mobile. Something else that also changed is right around WoW, and maybe this is our fault. WoW had a lot to do to broaden the market and make it mass market. The South Park episode on WoW, everything else, suddenly gaming was mainstream. And what happened then was you got a new class of casual gamer.
Mm-hmm.
And the new class of casual gamer, they just want an experience. They want to push a button to advance to the next part of the game. They want to sit down, drink a beer after a hard day's work. They got kids, maybe they don't have a lot of time. They just want to like have a good campaign, say, yeah, I finished the game, and not have anything that's going to be too much of a challenge because they don't got the time for it. I'm not saying they're not skilled. If they wanted to, I'm sure they could do it, but that's not the experience that they want. And then you have the casual gamer, what we used to call the casual gamer. They got older and they got families too, and they had less time to play games, right? And so now but that's still there. The casual gamer donut is still there, but it's not catered to anymore. You either are catering towards the huge mass market, or you're targeting mobile games, which is even bigger. Or as an indie, you are targeting very sort of small niche genres. But what's happening is you're getting something in between, right? Because indie games used to be pixel games. They used to be very short games, very simple mechanics, because the tools were very hard. You had to program everything from scratch. The art tools were very primitive. It was, you didn't have the means to make anything more than that. But as we get better tools, as the engines are, you can get great free engines, right? If you're an indie gamer, you got Unity, you got Unreal, you can make a AAA game out of that if you want to. You can compete with the big boys more and more. You have the rise of AI, which is making coding challenges easier, which is making, some art challenges easier. If you wanted to go that route, you can start to make a game that approaches the experience that you could get out of AAA. And this has left room for that, the former casual gamer market, which still exists, different age group now, but they are not the mass market. They have time to play games, but they want a challenge, and they want genres they can't get from AAA. That is a huge niche that is starting to open up for indie gaming. And I think that Larian's not an indie gamer. I would say they're what I call a AA studio, right? They're a AA studio in size and in resources, doing a AAA game now, right? So, yeah, I think that what's happening now is finally the technology and the tools are at a point where even with a small team, you can accomplish an awful lot, and you can start to, and this audience, which has felt neglected for so long because AAA doesn't cater to them, now wants something to play, and this is a great time to jump in there. And that's the target of my company. It's like, I'm not trying to be AAA. I'm not trying to be an indie studio. I'm trying to be, right in the middle there, where with a small team and not a lot of resources, because the last thing I want to do is deal with suits, right? I can take these tools, I can use them to my advantage, and I can cater to the audience that we used to at Blizzard. And that's what I like to do. And I'm not trying to make another $1 billion franchise. I have like $3 billion franchises under my belt. That's not my interest, right? I just want to fulfill that vacuum that I, as a gamer, want again. That Baldur's Gate 3 definitely tickled in me. I want to go back to that, and those are the types of games I want to make.
So, do you think that there could come a day where some indie games could supplant the AAA titles? Somebody could come out with the next WoW from an indie studio and just completely blow, Blizzard or Larian out of the water.
Yeah, I think tools are getting better and better, both on the creative side as well, the art side, as well as the coding side. That's a possibility, but you still have to have the good gameplay, and that's always an outlier. You're going to have it doesn't mean that suddenly you're going to have a flood and every indie game is great. It just means that indie games can start to deliver closer to those AAA experiences, and if they pick the genre right, where the scope and resource scale doesn't matter, they could absolutely, and they have the right game design, they could absolutely blow a AAA studio out of the water. And what's going to happen is AAA will go down that road and start copying them mercilessly, or they'll just buy them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's what we see a lot of, right, Michael? We see a lot of these smaller studios do something really great, and then next thing you know, they're getting gobbled up by a corporation, and kind of lose
Yeah,
their
yeah.
identity, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, of course they want to make the money. They'd love to make the money. And maybe it turns into, oh yeah, we'll let you keep going. You'll be able to do everything you want to do. Just sign on the dotted line, totally pat you on the back. And you believe them because you
Sure,
hope
George.
to believe them.
Sure,
Yeah.
we're going to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
7, 8, and 9.
And the next thing you know, it's like, meet your new boss.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That sort of a situation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
No, I was just saying that we do see that quite often. That's happening, and and it also is that they're chasing that brass ring because they want to make money. They need to make money, enough money to be able to live or have their work life balance and pay their bills and that sort of thing. So it's interesting to watch because they'll see something make money. They try to make something similar to that. The AAA makes all this money. We're going to make something similar to the AAA instead of being able to sort of go off on their own path and make something of their own uniqueness, because unfortunately it's just so saturated. It's ridiculous. There's so much out there, the thousands and thousands of games that are just, and how do you compete? How do you rise above that? And you really touched on that, GRUMMZ, because you get people to play it. You make your Among Us, and then you keep going out there to the influencers. Hey, check this out. Hey, what's up? What do you think of this? And it's very similar to back in the broadcast industry. What would you do? You'd make a product, and then you would make a bunch of those products and send them all to the celebrities and be like, here's all your free samples of all the free stuff. And, if you really enjoy it, maybe you'll say something about it, or we could talk business or something like that. So then maybe you get Shaq to go, I like this orange juice, who knows? You know what I mean? But that's the same pattern. It's the same model. It's just we have people that attract an audience, and then we try to get those people to play your game. So you send it to them, and what can you do? What kind of deal can you make? What kind of money can you offer? Or if you can't offer money, maybe you're whatever it is. It's just very similar to see that, and that, I think, like you also alluded to, was that they don't know that aspect of it. You could have somebody that could jump into RPG Maker and make totally awesome game. Like, yeah, this is cool. I really like this, but they have no clue how to market it. They got no clue how to reach out to influencers, or who to reach out to, or how to do it, or any of those. So there's all this, I call it a fish ladder. I don't know. I'm from Oregon, so I know what fish ladders are. I don't know if you all know what a fish ladder is, but it's where you build the stairs next to the dam that the fish have to then hop up there, and they don't know how to hop up the next step. They go, oh, I'm a fish. I know how to get here. Now, how do I get to the next level? And how do I get there? I don't know. I don't know how to get there. And they're also competing with the 50,000 other fish and trying not to get eaten by a bear.
That's your indie mobile game, Michael. Fish ladder.
Yeah. Fish ladder.
Fish ladder. You get to the next level by paying 99 cents. That's how you get to the next level.
Well, exactly, because you got to have the microtransactions, and you've got to have all. And there's so many wonderful rabbit holes we can go down to, because we have this wealth of knowledge. One of the things I was hoping that we could bring up as we were talking about Blizzard, and talking about the MMO and how World of Warcraft seemed to crack open the mainstream. Because we always, we were all sitting around cafeteria playing our D&D, playing our games, or you'd go to the arcade and you'd have the over the shoulder, you're watching that score rise, and you're just like, is he going to do it? Are they going to, oh, he got the ghost. Okay. And maybe you put your quarter up on the screen, that sort of thing. But then when WoW hit, it went crazy. It went, you had Shatner, you had all these celebrities, you had Felicia Day with, don't you want to date my avatar? And it just kind of just went nuts, to the point where anybody, the casuals, like you said, you had all your hardcores that came over, and they're doing their raids, 40-man raids and things. And then you had your casuals that could come in there. And, I was sort of in the middle. I had a guild that we ran, a horde guild that we ran, and I loved the Tauren culture. I just grafted onto that so tightly. It was a Tauren guild, the whole thing. And we would just sit there and play. And we made games. I made a Tauren ball game that we played at the village and all this other kind of stuff, and make bread. I was like, I would go in there and spend half an hour making Mulgore spice bread. It was like, and that was my gaming. I was like, there you go. I got my gaming fix. I made some bread. I gave it to people. It was fun. It was just sort of interesting. And so Well, I guess where I'm going with that is, and you talked about that's sort of the niche you're going for. You know, you want to bring back some being able to be a casual, you know, being able to go in and have a rewarding experience, but you don't necessarily have to be good enough to do Dark Souls or something. You're not, you know, elite to do that, but you want to have a rewarding experience. So my question then, where it all comes down to, is when you are designing your game and you're considering the casual player, how do you feel about what's now coming out that I see is story mode? You know, you do story mode, everything's easy, you're not going to die, you get to do the story. What is your take on that?
Story mode games are very popular with the AAA crowd, right? They, like I said, they're the type that we just don't have as much time online anymore because we have so many competing attentions online. We have work online. We have social media. You know, we've got Instagram. We've got, you know, Facebook still. When's that going to die? Please die.
Pretty soon. It's getting there. We're in the stage.
And
so we can hope.
And you know, back in the day, WoW, part of what made WoW super popular and what made MMOs as a genre super popular was they were an online social network before there were social networks.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, your friends were there, your guilds were there. You didn't mind a slower pace of gameplay because, or even downtime in EverQuest, staring at a book, because you were chatting with your friends during that time.
You were waiting for the mob to spawn. That's what we would do. We'd all sit around, and then we were literally standing in a line, you know.
And you didn't have a smartphone. You didn't have text going on. You didn't have Twitter. You didn't have Facebook. This was it. So we were the social network. And in order to partake in that social network, you had to game a little bit. So I think that's why it exploded as a cultural phenomenon, and I think that's why MMOs are more niche these days. Some would say they're kind of dying, but they still make plenty of money, especially in Asia. It's because, but it's definitely why MMOs now cater to much faster leveling times, no downtime. Jump into your dungeon finder and go dungeon to dungeon and get in and get out. It's that type, and it's more of a single player experience because the social stuff was supplanted by stuff that's a lot easier and faster and gets the socialization done quicker through other means. You don't need MMOs to do that anymore. And that's why a lot of the stickiness is gone, because stickiness comes from socialization. And if you don't have socialization, you're going to MMO hop, because your friends don't stick around. The other thing that's happening is, you guys touched on this, is, and I don't know, Neon, if you brought up this point in one of your videos, but we're losing our pop culture.
Yeah, everything is fragmented. We have so many niche, pursuits, and you look at, even something like TikTok. Like my daughter is always on TikTok, and there's all these little subclasses of, we've got like book TikTok, game TikTok, this TikTok, that, and so even if you're using TikTok, you're not all using the same TikTok. You're all having a very tailored experience. And so, I mean, my own personal opinion is, because we're not all watching the Cosby Show anymore. We're not all watching Friends anymore. It's like everybody's watching whatever streaming show, and you're not getting as many people watching each individual show, but there's something for everybody. But unfortunately, we don't have those shared experiences anymore.
Yeah, the water cooler moments where you watch, Lost in the evening, and then then work it next day. You gather around the water cooler and you talk about the last episode of Lost and how crazy it was. People are watching different things, streaming services, everything, and music too. People don't listen to the same bands anymore. There's no mega bands. I mean, aside from obviously there were a few, but not like it was back in the day where everyone was listening to the same stuff because you're all getting it from radio, a single point source. Now it's algorithmically tailored to you.
Yeah.
And basically the AI is figuring out what you like and giving you more of that. And if you discover, and it's more about discovering in a vast sea of media out there, what is it that you like? And it's going to be a totally different mix than what your friend likes. And that is happening with games too. I think that there's no longer sort of like a watershed game that everyone plays. I guess there is still with some AAA, but it's less and less. And definitely with indies, it's more about finding your audience and targeting them and giving them a great experience. What is it that they want? That's what you have to do to succeed. I don't think you can be the one game that rules them all. That's a very outlier thing right now. You just have to find your circle of buddies that enjoys the same type of game that you do, and do the best job you can entertaining them.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
I guess
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Michael. No.
Well, this reminded me when you were talking about the fracturing of and as we interweave culture with gaming, and gaming being an interactive media, which is then it becomes part of our culture and part of who we are, and it really becomes part of a tapestry of sort of as we had our culture, and we have the water cooler moment, right? So you had the people at your work that were your buddies, you'd all talk about Lost, and that was its own sort of group, that sort of subculture thing. And we'd also have, people. So when we were growing up, it was like, hey, did you get to level 8 or 9 on Mario? Or did you, then if we had a game was narrative part, did you kill this boss or solve these things? And so we had those groups. And what it seems, unfortunately, now is that it seems that it is shifted to in the gaming industry and in the entertainment industry, the politicizing and the tribalization and the fracturing of it. So we'll go down this dark rabbit hole. This is the not fun part of witnessing the people that go and say, well, you played Hogwarts Legacy, so now you're a blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Or you played Baldur's Gate, so that makes you a blah, blah, blah. And it's amazing to me to watch this, because I sat here and I actually did a little video and I was like, no, this is, you're really, it's this crazy exaggeration of what it was back in the lunchroom. If y'all remember that, you'd go to lunchroom and like, that table is the hicks, and that table is the jocks, and that table is the preps, and that table is the nerds, and there's the drama geeks. And everybody had our own little things and cliques and groups, and we'd all be in there. But now all of a sudden, instead of going out and saying, well, in the gaming industry, it is becoming this politicizing part of it. And I think part of it is that we're searching for that culture. We don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
You'd log into EverQuest and you're all standing around, and you didn't even need to know them. You didn't even know who they were, but it was like, yeah, we're waiting for the orc to spawn so we can all get the +1 ring. Okay, cool. Sit around, talk, Hey, did y'all see how much RAM is now? Yeah, 4 megs for, oh my gosh, whatever, stuff. We had similarities because we're all in a similar environment with similar things and similar stuff, and you could bond and you could meet and you could talk and things like that. But we don't have that. You like you just said, you MMO hop. It's because you can jump into your MMO, hit Dungeon Finder, go to the dungeon. You don't know anybody. So the experience is completely and utterly different than raiding with your guild or finding friends or something. And you jump in there, it's like, okay, well, hopefully I'll get my +2 bow will drop once we finally do the mob or whatever. But then you leave. Everybody comes together. It's leave. It's like a hookup. You just, hey, yeah, sure, we leave. Yeah, we're here now. We leave. That's what it felt like to me. And so that's when I was kind of like, no, this isn't what I want. I want a game that I feel part of something, a culture, a group, a society, or something more than just. I popped in. I knew where to stand because I knew not to stand in the glowing spot, so I didn't get everybody killed. Whatever, I was like, meh.
This is a great danger for humanity. Mm-hmm. And technology is great, but technology has done some terrible things to us as a society, and this is why this is a big contributing factor, I think, to the rise of loneliness and the lack of connection. And the growing feelings of alienation. You take, the problem of the fracturing of the pop culture, because we're not Europe. We don't have thousands of years of history, right? I used to joke that in America, pop culture is our culture, and our collective memory as a society and stuff we could agree on, right? We all like to watch Lost, or we all like to do this, we all like to do that. And as you lose that, you get these smaller communities, but they're not even people you meet. It's just people online. and you stop having things in common in culture to identify with. All you have left is your own identity, right?
Mhm.
And so this is, I think, helps feed the rise of tribalism and identity politics too, because we have increasingly less to share in common with each other, and we are being balkanized by the algorithm. The algorithm is driving us apart.
Mhm.
Okay. And Neon, I know you're not a fan of Twitter, but I saw an interesting thread on Twitter where I think it was Cat Turd saying this, right? The infamous Cat Turd. He was saying that Twitter is trying to drive us all towards the middle.
Meaning what? The
Meaning
middle of what?
that he was saying it because he feels he's being throttled and shadow banned, right? And it's because he represents one extreme of the spectrum. Other people represent the other extreme of the spectrum, and Twitter is trying to. They're doing things where you get to see everything. Like blocking is going away. So that you will see the tweets of these other people with other viewpoints, and they're trying to be more moderate, not on one side or the other, but by pushing it together. And is that a response? Does Elon see this sort of argument that we're making right now about the balkanization, how the algorithm divides us? And is he trying to say we actually have more in common than we think? And is that an experiment that's even going to work? And is Twitter even the right place for that?
Okay, so which Elon are we talking about? Are we talking about Elon Musk, the human being, or are we talking about Elon Musk, the businessman? Because Elon Musk, the human being, might believe we all need to sit down and talk. And I think most of us, regardless of where you're at politically, unless you're very extreme, sitting down face to face, talking it out is the way to go. When you realize that your adversary is a human being with feelings and families, and their experiences, inform their current viewpoints, right? So we might have that Elon, but the other Elon is the businessman who's like, the more engagement we get, the more money I make, and God knows I got to make money because I dropped $44 billion on this piece of shit, right? I got to make money. So, and he's got that advertising exec he hired as the CEO. So this is my personal opinion. My personal opinion is I think Twitter is removing the roadblocks, the barriers that we have put up amongst our tribes in order to get everybody to engage. And it might not all be good engagement, but it's still engagement, and it can still be bottled and marketed and sold to advertisers.
Yeah, Twitter is PvP.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's going to be a free-for-all. And I think that's it's going to be good, I think, from a numbers perspective. It's going to be bad because I think it's actually going to drive people away. Now, you can think what you want about block. People are like, oh, blocking's for pussies, whatever. I'm like, yeah, but in some cases, that's the only reason that some people stay. If they can curate their experience on social media, on Twitter. It's like, I'm not going to go on Twitter if I'm going to be screamed at all day, but if I can block these people out and I can just go and focus on my interests and my tribe and whatever, they're going to stay. You take that away, they're going to go to like Discord or something where they can have a private conversation because they don't want to deal with all the other people that are going to be in their face all the time. So I think it's going to wind up being the Jerry Springer show, personally.
So, that's how do we solve this problem? Let's pull away from Twitter in Elon. We were all sort of nodding our heads saying, yeah, the algorithm drives us apart because it caters to our interests and amplifies those interests, to almost hyperbole, right? Or let's face it, in many cases, hyperbole. How do we fix that? How do we fix social media in general to where we focus not on catering to the individual and exacerbating their cultural view on media, the movies they like or the politics they like? How do we change that to bring them together instead? And why isn't anybody talking about this more?
I think we need to, and I know that like when you join a social media platform before the algorithm kicks in, they will give you like, what are your interests, right? I would say start with what's trending. What are the most people talking about organically, not what's being rigged, but what are all the common issues that everybody's talking about, and that is your start page. This is what everybody's talking about right now. They're all talking. This is the water cooler. This is the water cooler. This is what the majority of people are interested in right now, general audience, right? And then you can get more granular, like, okay, well, if you're not interested in Lost, maybe you're interested in this other thing or whatever, and that's fine. That's like an optional thing. But I think finding the most common ground and putting that in front of people versus like, oh, hey, we heard you're really angry about the Democrats or you're really angry about the Republicans. Here, let's show you some more accounts that are also angry about the Democrats or the Republicans. Just be like, no, here's just general news. Here's what's going on. Here's what's going on in the world today. Oh, look, here's some nice pictures of kittens. You like kittens, right? Or you're more of a dog person. Okay. And then just kind of work out from there. Here's our common ground, and then we're going to start branching off, once you've gotten tired of that or rejected that or whatever. But what they're doing is it's being trained to show you what is going to get the most engagement, good or bad. So you're not really you get to a point where you're not even being shown options. Like you get to a point where you interact with so many accounts that have the same point of view and the same interest.
It's an echo chamber.
It's an echo chamber. You don't even get shown the other side of it. You don't get shown moderate takes. If you interact primarily with extreme voices or people that follow accounts with extreme voices, or they only follow one side of the aisle, that's all you're going to be shown. And I think that is the problem, because you lose empathy or perspective for the other side or other points of view because they're blocked out from your feed. That's my opinion.
I think, unfortunately, though, what everyone likes to talk about is controversy. Yeah, that drives the trend list, manipulated or not.
Right.
People gravitate towards a couple things, and one of them is train wrecks. So when you get people talking about controversy, you're again dividing people. So I actually think that I don't know if there's a solution for social media that would be profitable. Like, hey, you can't just have kumbaya stuff trending. But going back to that water cooler conversation, the one thing that we can do is media and pop culture can play a huge role in giving people something outside of controversy that they really are into, right?
Yeah.
Like, and this is why I think we have a responsibility as movie makers, comic makers, and game makers to avoid politics.
Yep.
Because
exactly.
We are the last bastion of commonality that can possibly bridge the gap. I like to talk about how games should be a watering hole. The theory of watering hole. This could be a myth, but in Africa, the lions and the tigers will sip water from the same lake side by side with their prey, right?
Yeah.
That needs to happen. We need to have these watering holes. And unfortunately, kumbaya stuff doesn't work, but media does. Pop culture does. People love that. People engage with it so much. And if we're going to get a lot of people engaging with it, that's our opportunity to knit us back together. And the last thing we should do is exacerbating what the AI algorithms are doing on social media and driving people apart by including too much politics. I think it can be, you can skirt it. You can have interesting debates that show both sides. Like I always love seeing the twist where you think you have one political view, you're diehard against the other, but media with a soft touch shows you the other side, right? Yeah. And then you go, yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way. Yeah. I don't think we had this responsibility before, but I think we definitely have it now because I don't see any way out of it. I think it's got to come through all of our, they say culture is downstream. What is it? Do I have it backwards? What's downstream from politics?
Pop culture.
Pop culture is downstream from politics. Yeah. Suddenly we're in this position where I think, oh crap, if we don't do something to bring people together and give them something they agree on outside of their own identity in politics, where else are they going to get it? And to me, as a creator, I'm starting to think at this level where it's like, I wish I could create entertainment that brings people together. That doesn't mean remove politics from games or anything like that, but it means sort of like giving a soft-handed touch to it, showing interesting questions and posing them and getting people to think differently. But primarily just to entertain them and have a great time so that they forget about all this other stuff and they can have a conversation together. And now two people from vastly different political views can say, oh, but we both like this game, and wasn't it great when this happened and that happened? And then you laugh together, and it softens everything. So, I don't know how to solve it for a social network, which, like, as you pointed out, from the business side of things, PvP sells, right? PvP gets engagement. And unfortunately, I see the YouTube algorithm driving creators to polarize as well, and to cater to this sort of like PvP mentality, because that's what they want. That's to sell ads. That's what the algorithm's going to promote. So if you don't create content that way, they're not going to promote you as much. So who's left? Movies, comic books, games.
Right, exactly. And where we end up with social media and the algorithm is clearly showing, the snake is eating its tail, and it will just continue to give you that algorithm, because it's based on business. It's based on money. So every single time that it was like, well, you clicked on that ad, so keep going, because we want more and more and more and more until, you're spending all of your money and time in their tribe. And that's because that's what they want. They want all of the money. And then if you have, what you were talking about with the gaming and the culture, and as creators, we're trying to create things that are just simply good stories, human stories. I think that's what it boils down to, is what type of story are you telling in your game? Is it a human story, something that is relatable across everyone? Neon, you brought that up. Everybody's got families, there's cultures, and there's other things that everybody has. So when you have a great piece of media, it's something that just about anybody should be able to observe this or interact with this media, and then go, wow, I get that. I get this part. I get that part. And we'll each get different parts, because some of them are our parents and some of us aren't. And some of us are whatever it is, but we all get a piece of it. And where I think we need to try to start drawing lines in the sand, unfortunately, is where it becomes this political problem where, you play Hogwarts and we don't like Hogwarts, so you're a horrible person. And then it drives this huge wedge. You can't even talk about the fact, is it a good game? Does it have good mechanics? Or what are the graphics like? We have no freaking clue. All we talk about is that, it was Rowling and it was this and it was that, blah, blah, blah. It turns into the mess. And we need to say, we're not doing the mess. Like when we say no politics in tabletop. Like if you're here to play tabletop, you're here to play tabletop. We're not going to talk about, Bush, Clinton. I'm dating myself. Reagan. We're not,
we're really dating yourself.
Yeah, we're not talking about Kennedy. We're not talking about the grassy knoll. We're talking about orcs, that sort of thing. But then in the game design, you can have politics in there. You can have, does the kingdom of dwarves hate the elves, or does, what's going on with this or what's going on with that? So it's interesting. I really like getting into that. It's a very deep rabbit hole where you begin to realize. But the point I was going to is where I see where you're coming from, GRUMMZ, is that we as creators, maybe that's our agenda. Like what is our agenda? Because everything has an agenda, and people need to realize that. It all goes all the way back to broadcast TV, goes to books, everything. Every single thing has, there's an agenda. There's a reason to the story. There's something there. Whether it's pure, even the purest form of just entertainment, it's got something. There's some sort of narrative there. There's a reason why Buster Keaton was jumping around the train, or I'm trying to go back in time, or Odysseus, he was trying to get home. There's a reason to those narratives. It's not just pure fluff. There's something in there that resonates with us, so that we want to tell, and why we want to tell that story. So then it just becomes, we're trying to reach the audience. We're trying to make money. We're trying to juggle 15 balls, and we're trying to do it in a way that when we go out onto social media, we just say, hey, I made this cool thing and I hope you all like it. And it turns into, well, how many people of this do you have working for you? And how many people of that do you have working for you? You know what I mean? It can de-evolve into that. So where I'm going with all of this is there's what I see is there are some developers that are saying, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to politicize. We're not going to go down that road. Or you have others that jump full in, WotC, Wizards of the Coast. they jumped full in. They said,
Yeah.
this is our target audience. This is what we're doing.
Yep.
And these are the people we're catering to, and everybody else can pound sand. And that's fine. That's what they want to do. But now they're going to have to realize that all of their narrative, everything that they do is now going to be tainted by that particular slant and that particular, that's what they're doing. And now they're in that camp. And so then somebody from the other camps, well, I'm not even going to not even going to bother with it. But we're just trying to make something good and fun, that appeals to everyone, And I think that's sort of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was seeing that. I think that's very admirable. That's where I'm going with that as well. I think it's very admirable that you'd want to do that as a game designer and have that ideal and that goal of unity. And how do we bring people together at the water cooler?
That's what we should be doing. I mean, and that's what we used to do. And it has changed. I think just people in general are prone to wanting to join a clan, right? They,
well, it's a bit of our hardwiring too.
But yeah, we're hardwired to join groups. That's part of our identity. And if you're not getting it from your society, your culture, whatever, you're going to latch on to whatever. And if it becomes your politics or your gender or whatever the deal is, you look at it, and at the root of it, it's always, I belong here. I belong to this group, So if we're taking away groups or identities for people to belong to, they're going to get more and more granular until they find something and be like, okay, well, I'm part of this group, I guess, because I'm not part of the bigger group. I'm the outcast. I'm part of this group over here. And that's kind of how nerds, and geeks found each other. A lot of us were outcasts. We didn't belong to the other groups. So we clanned up together, and then we started playing D&D and video games. And, because you always find your people. You want to find your people. You want to belong. That's human nature. And, maybe what needs to happen is, we need to, I guess, cast a wider net, so people don't feel so disenfranchised, so they don't go, join in these groups or whatever, or feeling disenfranchised or cut out of the bigger pop culture. I don't know.
You focus you focus on entertainment. If you create incredible entertainment, people will rally around it and feel good. And we are the escapism from all the other stuff, but we are also the common ground. We can have different types of people have those water cooler conversations, and that means focusing on entertaining first, and getting the messages out of there, or if that's something that you want to talk about, do it in a thoughtful way, do it in a thought-provoking way that gets the other side to empathize with that and to consider it, and do it with a light touch, man. Do it with a light touch. Focus on the entertainment and give people a reason to galvanize around it. And you can still have those mega hits. There are still, things that cross boundaries and go super mainstream, that can appeal to a very wide audience. And oddly enough, it's not about, how representative you are in your characters or anything else or your themes. It's really more about what is the common entertainment that everyone can get behind. And you alluded to humanity. And this is what, authors have talked about, the human condition, and philosophers have talked about the human conditions for so long. We have problems in common and experiences in common as human beings that are universal, right? We were born to biological parents. We live, we are born, we die, we suffer, we have happiness. These are all common to all of us. These are things that we really should, be leveraging more than ever to try to provide a balance to what's happening out there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great thought to end this episode on. And I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation. GRUMMZ, thank you so much for coming on. I think we'll have to definitely do it again, because there's so many rabbit holes that we could go down. We could get 10 hours, out of this conversation, but I don't have 10 hours today, and I don't think neither of you do either. But thank you so much again, GRUMMZ, for coming on. Michael,
my pleasure,
for coming on. Definitely. Guys, do you want to give a real quick shout out to where people can find you online? GRUMMZ, why don't you go ahead first?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter is my medium. You can find me at GRUMMZ on Twitter, and that's the best place to find me. If you're interested in what we're doing with the game and what I'm trying to do with multiplayer to help bring people together in a entertainment experience, you can go to our Discord server. It's just Ember, EM-8ER. It's pronounced Ember, but it's spelled with an 8. And people there are real friendly. They'll tell you about the game if you're interested in that. But those are the two places I hang out. I hang out on Discord and I hang out on Twitter.
Awesome. Michael Hovermail, where can people find you?
Well, primarily I have a very tiny YouTube channel, Graph Paper Architect, but I really have retracted from social media. So I'm not on Twitter's, Facebook's, any of that sort of situation at all. It's going to be very minimal for me. So finding me and contacting me, yeah, I'll probably check it in a month. So really, yeah, I hate to say it, but I'm going through a bit of a, interesting time to just reconsider and refocus exactly what I want to be doing on social media and why, and give it more of a specific purpose, because I don't have any interest in scrolling. It doesn't appeal to me anymore. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. You can find me there, and yeah, I'm also on Discord. I like Discord because it's a focused media. I can go in there, and I'll be in Ember, so I'll see you in there, GRUMMZ.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
All right. Hey guys, thank you so much. Again, thank you everyone listening to this podcast. Please subscribe wherever you find it. If you found it on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, wherever else they blast this out to. This is DRES'd on Clownfish TV. There are more Clownfish TV videos on YouTube and Rumble as well. Thank you so much, guys. We'll talk again.